The chief priests and the elders handed Jesus over to Pilate. Then Pilate entered the judgment hall and said to Jesus,
"Art thou the King of the Jews?"
Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me?
Am I a Jew, thine own nation, and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me? What hast thou done? What hast thou done?
My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered unto the Jews, that I should not be delivered unto the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. My kingdom is not from hence.
Art thou a king then?
Thou sayest that I am a king. Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. My kingdom is not of this world.
Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!"
And Pilate said,
When Pilate therefore heard the crowd, he was the more afraid. He entered the judgment hall again and said,
When sat down,
But Jesus gave him no answer.
speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee?
Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that hath delivered me unto thee at the greater sin.
and from then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying,
If thou let this man go, then thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king, speaketh against Caesar, speaketh against Caesar. If thou let this man go, then thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king, speaketh against Caesar, speaketh against Caesar. If thou let this man go.
On hearing this, Pilate brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat called Gabbatha. It was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews,
Behold your king. Behold your king.
Away with him, away with him, away with him, away with him. Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him,
Shall I crucify your king? Shall I crucify your king?
what's the political situation? What are we going through? The CAA, the NPA, what have you, the UAPA, all these things. What's the situation with extremism today in the country? And yet, we are all subjects to the law. Mark, you want to start this? You are doing Pilate in this sequence. What were you going through, when you were delivering this piece?
So I've been struggling to record Pilate's parts this week because of my voice. But to really help me with it, for a moment I imagined that we were in St. Joseph's School Hall and Joe was like, Mark, act it out. and it was really weird because without looking at these images or without actually by just hearing about Pilate in the gospel and stuff, very often you think of him as this this person of power who was abusing it or just yielding it blindly. But when I had to embody it in a certain way, I could see that in the beginning, or the initial sort of parts that I had to sing. It was me trying my best to not be swayed by the crowd, but I tried my best to use reason. Like Pilate was trying his best to use reason to like try to understand, like, okay, this guy, like, because it's very confusing, because there's this guy who's come and he's saying, and apparently he's a king. Like, okay, interesting. And he's a king of these Jews, these people who I'm supposed to govern, so to say. And it is incredibly confusing. And then he's like, okay, then what is the crime? What have you done here? You just called yourself a king. I mean, anyone can just go around and do that. Have you been causing some sort of civil unrest with your actions and things like that? And it was, so there's this moment of questioning that he's going through, right? But this is also this point where he's just like, okay, let's just follow the mob and just go with it. And while I was recording these parts, I could hear my father listening to I think Colbert or Jimmy Fallon or someone in the back, and where you realize that so many of our laws, or so many political leanings, especially the extremists, like extreme left and extreme right, are based on this thing of, yeah, man, let's feed the crowd what they want. Let's keep that going, because as long as I get a quick fix to peace, as long as I get a quick fix to retaining and having my power, because Pilate was in a conundrum. Like, he had to basically get some sort of peace as soon as possible. So he couldn't risk any sort of unrest. He was in this dilemma, like, okay, what do I do? Like, I don't want to be an unjust person. I don't want to be branded with the guilt of being an unjust person. But at the same time, I have a certain position that I need to maintain. Automatically, the way I was seeing it was less about anger and less about why the hell are you wasting my time with this, and more about questioning and then surrender, and just letting go and giving up. And that was my sort of journey through understanding the part.
Mark said two things just now about follow the norm and letting go and just giving up. I feel for the people who've met with success, bosses and all of them. It's not easy. And like, I really liked what Mark said about, like, he was finding a way. In the end, he had to give up. But in the end, there were rules that he had to just live by. And so many people who've met with success, who are bosses, who do try there, and then sometimes win, sometimes lose, I suppose. But it's not hunky-dory. Like, many times you kind of think of the underdog, or the employee, and not the employer. And I'm just talking just generally about, everyone's has rules that they have to go by, and he was just he followed the rule, or he tried not to follow it, but then just succumbed. So I'm thinking of those people who've met with success, who are bosses, who are people who are in like that Pilate situation. And sometimes, I mean, they can't win everything. So sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. So for the times that they lose, I'm just thinking of them.
What struck me was a lot of the people in the crowd shouting was just shouting because everybody else was shouting. And Pilate, he did not know what to do, and he did what he did. But Pilate could have made all the difference. In our everyday lives, do we just join the bandwagon, or do we make a difference and want to be the difference and to be the difference?
Yeah, just to continue from what Marina said, I always think about this, that bad things happen because good people don't speak out. And many a time I'm guilty of not speaking out. You see something happening and you just watch it as if it's something on a screen in front of you. It's the news, right? What does it concern me? It doesn't concern me. It's not affecting me personally, but it is. Because I'm not speaking out, I have to add my voice to it. And in part of our Zoom discussions over the past months during this lockdown, there's been a lot of discussion about issues that have taken place that about unjust situations in our country, well, they don't directly affect us, but that doesn't mean that they are that we haven't to speak out. We have to speak out because they do affect us. Because at the end of the day, if I don't speak out for something, for an injustice, I am part of the problem. By not speaking out, I am part of this problem. Our Holy Father talks about sins of omission and sins of commission. So it's a sin of omission if I don't speak out, if I don't add my voice to the voices of so many speaking against an injustice. I'm sitting on the fence. I don't want to put myself at risk. It's risky, right? To express your views on social media, and especially now, so because you can be shut down, you can be called anti-national. It's risky to speak. And just to take forward what Mark spoke, I think of these two things. What was the law created for? The law was created for protection, right? But what's at the heart of the law? And if we really look deeply, we'll see at the heart of law is mercy. Because the way you apply the law is what makes the difference. The law is just the law. It has no life until you apply it. Once you begin to apply the law, how do you apply the law? With mercy or to suit your convenience? Jesus spoke about the law. He said, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill the law. And he fulfilled the law with his act of mercy. So mercy surpasses justice. Even if they did think that Jesus did something wrong, why did they have to crucify him? Why do they have to torture him? Why did they have to put him to death? Even if they thought he did something wrong, because they removed mercy from their hearts.
It takes me back to again Father Stan. We all know it is so unjust where he is now and what he is going through. And there were petitions that were sent on WhatsApp for us to, sign our petitions. And every petition signed could make that difference. So it's important, as Celeste said, to take part and be that voice, however small it is and however menial it might sound, but to make that difference.
In India, we have the situation with the Dalits and with other minority communities, and there is a section of society that is hell bent on keeping these people away from getting their dues, and that's exactly what Stan Swami stood for. He stood with and amongst these very people from Chhattisgarh, from Jharkhand. So we have pilots all over the place.
What we need to reflect on is, in all these crowds, who are we? And in this time of Jesus, those crowds loved Jesus. They followed Jesus. They were healed by him. They were taught by him. They crowded behind him. But they were so easily incited by just these few to turn against Jesus. And even today, in all these protests we see, how many of those people who are protesting really believe in the cause that they are protesting? Or they're being fueled by these few who, call the shots and spread their views and fire people up, and they go out and protest. See, even Myanmar, I'm not saying right, wrong, but people are getting killed. Bristol, they had big protests because the government put this ban on protests. So they're coming out in protest, and people are being killed and people are being hurt. And who is this fueled by? I mean, in this whole scenario we've been looking at, Pilate, unfortunately, even though he was a man in authority, he was actually one of the crowd. He didn't have the strength of character to follow through what he believed, even though he had the authority. I mean, he was a chap who had power. Of course, Jesus says, no power is given unto you unless my heavenly Father gives it to you. But he was a man in power, but he didn't have the courage to stand by his convictions. Bottom line is, who are you and who am I? Am I one of those who believes deeply, follows deeply, and lives accordingly? Uh, am I one of these people who uses tactics to fuel people into believing things and following my cause? Or am I just a follower? who gets swayed by every speech and every talk. I mean, you're talking about even COVID and this whole vaccine. How many conspiracy theories that have been coming out that if you take a vaccine, your DNA is being altered. And if you take a vaccine, Bill Gates is trying to put a chip into, into your body so that they can monitor your movements. You know, so many conspiracy theories which are fueled by a few, and it's we, so many of us, that are so gullible by everything that is spoken with conviction, but we don't take the time to think for ourselves. Am I the follower? Am I the thinker who generates following? Or am I the devil who generates following in the wrong direction? And unless you and I get a handle of this, and what I am going to do with it, identify myself among these different categories of people and act on it, we'll be just followers. I mean, somebody says, oh, pro-life, and I follow pro-life. Or somebody gives a good argument for, you know, pro-abortion, gives a good argument, solid argument, and I follow, and, you know, pro-abortion, pro, the whole current thing now is homosexuality. I mean, where do I stand on my whole thinking on that? There is a church thinking, there is people who pursue a certain angle, another angle, and I sway in between, but what do I stand for? And am I so convinced that I'll take a stand in either camp? Or do I just say, well, you know, it doesn't bother me. It's not my problem. I'm not homosexual, so let's just let it go. I'm not proposing either stand. I'm just saying, do we think for ourselves? Do we have the courage to hold our own convictions and battle our own convictions among the people in our circle of influence? Or do we just follow the crowd and I got nothing to say on this?
There's just one line that keeps coming back to me, which is more theatrical. The law is an ass. Because all the laws that we see and all that we hear about are man made. No matter what we try to, as humans or as countries, try to put laws in place, um, we try to say that our own laws derived from God's laws, but far from being God's laws, be it any country in the world. Like you said, we are still trying to even understand the kingdom of God. So, how do we get to understand what are His laws? Jesus is asking us to believe and go beyond the laws and look at, you know, truth. Try to understand truth. And He says truth is not to be found in the law. He's saying truth is to be found in your own heart. And if you listen to your heart, you will hear my voice. It's a very difficult statement to say because he's not saying it, you hear my voice as a human. He's saying you will hear my voice as God's voice. And that is what touched me because whenever we do something wrong, um, subject to our hearts not being hardened, we know we are doing something wrong. We know we are crossing the law. We know we're crossing the line. Um, and when we are being unjust, we know we're doing it. And today it's so difficult because all these lines have blurred. It's all happening today. We can see those questions being asked even today. When today you say this is what I believe is the truth, somebody will today even ask you, that is your truth. What about my truth? In other words, asking you what is the truth, and we can't answer that question. Today, when you say this is what I believe, somebody will say, but there are another 10,000 people who believe differently from you, and they are in the majority. That is the truth. That is the law. We are in majority, we will change the law. So these are all things which are pretty much relevant today.
I also think of judgment and how we come up with the punishment based on the crime, and these people are bad, and then we hand out judgment to them, and we punish them with our own, with what in our head, what we think they deserve to suffer. We hand out these judgment as people of the crowd. But if we were in Pilate's position, we would also want to play, the safe game. Okay, I'll hand out the judgment that is popular with the crowd, but I don't want to personally be held accountable for what happens to the soul of this man. Are we necessarily without sin? Are we necessarily the people to be in that position to pass out a judgment on someone?
I'm finding that this entire meeting today has been very unsettling in many ways. And really causing me to think, like even what Norman said, where do I stand? You were talking about the protests in our countries, and I know where I stand in my head and in my heart, but like, what have been my actions? In our country, we've had this whole thing about assisted suicide. It's called MAID, medically assisted suicide. I say I'm against it or whatever. I say that in my heart, I don't want to do it. I wouldn't want it for myself. I wouldn't want it for other people, my family or whatever. But like, what have I done beyond writing that letter, beyond speaking to a few people in my circle of influence? Never really taken that next step. And I never looked at this section of, after Gethsemane and before the actual Calvary, um, to confuse me and to unsettle me so much in like, where am I in this and what have I done? And even as Jocelyn says, like in the end, we bow to the law. But and Jesus did that in his own way. I mean, he did that like as a model. How do I do that? Like, those are the questions that are just coming up to me right now. And it is unsettling. It's there's no answers, and there's no but it's good because it's kind of, you're thinking about your response to this whole thing about betrayal and condemnation, and not only on a personal level, but on a larger scale that affects our community, that affects our country in the end.